Okay, I'm delighted to welcome our next guest, Ian Noble, from the company Dancing Goat Coffee. A former pole vaulter with a personal best of 4.80 meters, Ian jumped into the coffee business and started Dancing Goat Coffee 11 years ago with his father Rod, and has built the company to new heights, supplying the north of England baristas in coffee shops, hospitality, and more recently has made the product available to the general public directly through the website. Now, Ian, reading around the subject, I understand a good coffee is made from the 4 M's. Now, I know you've been practicing your Italian, so maybe you can explain to us what the 4 M's are, and maybe you can show us how to make that perfect cup of coffee.
You're exactly correct, yes. So to make a really quality Italian espresso, what we need is the 4 M's, the 4 ingredients to do that. And they are the miscela, which is the blend of coffee. So today we're going to use the White Rose Republic blend from Dancing Goat. So I'm inspired by that Yorkshire character, a full-bodied, strong character, full coffee that we've got there. And then the second M is the Macchina Dosatore, which is, you can just see over my shoulder here, which is your coffee grinder. So it's a really essential part of getting the most from your coffee that you're going to use. You need to grind it perfectly for the brewing method that you're going to use. So we'll maybe come back to different styles of brewing later on as we have a chat. So then the third M is your Macchina per Caffè. So that's this beautiful looking lever, traditional lever machine from La Pavone that we've got here, that you can see at the side of me in the shop. This is kind of a very, it's the oldest way of making espresso, if you like, from Italy. So we're using a manual action to pull and compress some springs. And then that creates the 9.5 bar of pressure to push water through the correctly ground coffee into your cup. And that extracts the best part of the coffee from the ground coffee bean. And then finally, the fourth M is mano, or in this case, the barista, which is just my good self today. And there's a few ways of interpreting that barista element of the 4 M's, because the experience that barista brings to the preparation of your coffee can be down to setting up of the grinder to work with the correct brewing method. So in this case, the espresso machine. It can be selecting the beans. It can be making sure that you've got the correct dosing of the coffee into the group handle as well. So I think probably we'll go ahead, and the first thing that I'll do is I'll grind some coffee into one of my group handles here. So I'll disengage that from this machine here. And you can see that we've got an empty group handle there. We're going to use around about 15, maybe up to 16 grams of coffee to make a double espresso here. So I'm going to pop this against the front of the grinder. So you can hear the grinder working there. And what we're doing here is we're making quite a fine grind of coffee into the group handle.
So Ian, does the grinding differ? So here, obviously using the machine. What about if you're using a cafetiere at home or filter? What would it be, a similar grind, or would it be finer? Or
it's a really good point, because you can make a very poor cup of coffee if you don't get your grind right. So what you need to do is select the correct ground coffee for the method you're going to use. So a really nice analogy that I like to use is if we nip down to the beach and we take a colander with us, and we fill that colander full of pebbles, and that's like coarsely ground coffee, and we poured water into the top of that colander, the water would just rush through pass through the pebbles and out the bottom of the colander very quickly. And if those pebbles, we imagine, are the coffee, as the water passes through very quickly, it's not going to extract any of the properties of that ground coffee. So if we take the pebbles out and we put in sand into that colander and then pour water into the top of it, it'll take a long time for the water just being pulled through by gravity to pass through that colander full of sand. So what we're ideally looking for is maybe a halfway house between the pebbles and the finely ground sand or finely ground coffee, so that using the pressure of the machine, we can force water through the coffee and create the perfect extraction. Because there's a timing element as well, especially with espresso, where we don't want to be trying to extract from the coffee under pressure for too long. Otherwise, we have an over-extracted coffee, which starts to become quite a bitter tasting coffee and quite a sour taste to the coffee. So the first, as we said there, the first M was the coffee that we selected, the Michela, the blend of coffee. So the second M we've ground the coffee there. So now we're using my barista's experience. We're going to tamp the coffee. So we're going to use my weighted tamper here. And maybe I'll just do it in the back of the shot here. So we press down firmly, twist, and that creates a nice level, smooth surface to the coffee and the group handle there. And that means that when the water is pushed against the surface of that coffee, there's a very equal distribution as the water is pushed through and then out into the cup. So I'll lock my group handle in here. I'm going to use a glass espresso cup, so that hopefully on the camera you can see that pouring through. So I'll take a cup here. So as we pull down this lever here, we're then going to fill this chamber here with water, and that will push against the ground coffee, but only at 1 bar. So that's the pressure contained within the main part of the boiler on the machine. The pre-infusion means that the water is pushing on that coffee and it's soaking into there and expanding it inside the group handle. As I release the handle, the springs will recoil, and that creates the pressure as the water is pushed through the coffee to create the espresso. So you see me pull down the handle there. So the water is flooding into this chamber here as the piston has been retracted and the springs have been compressed. And then as we release that handle, you can't quite see on camera, but the gauge on the front of the group is there. I just didn't quite put that underneath both spans. It's gone up to just over 9 bar, so 9.5 bar, and hopefully on the camera you can see. Hopefully you can see that pouring through into the espresso cup. So as that finishes, I'll bring that out, and you should see a really nice creamy espresso. So when you're producing espresso, you always have this crema on top of the coffee, and that's an indication that you've got the extraction correct. And it should be a nice equal color. And then as we can see it developing, almost settling like a small pint of Guinness. Hopefully you can see that.
Yeah, we can see that well.
Yeah, cool.
Excellent. So that's a good cup of coffee. So
Yeah,
I have one here as well, because obviously in the current environment, I can't taste the one you've just poured. So
yeah, that's a real shame that we can't come and share a coffee, but
another time.
So
Ian, tell me that, coffee's become such a huge business with hundreds of varieties available. It seems somewhat mind-blowing. Can you give us some sort of tips about the various regions geographically and what we can expect? Because I understand there are some differences, but maybe you can explain, just some of the basic differences for us.
Yeah, certainly. And at Dancing Goat, we offer a range of both blends, our signature blends, which are constructed by the original ones, such as White Rose and Cafe Bar, constructed and put together by myself and my father at the very beginning when we put the business together. And you can choose blends from selected different coffees from different regions that complement each other. And then you can also have a single origin coffee. And they're usually a little bit more specialist, and they carry characteristics of the origin of that coffee or the region that coffee is grown in. So if we start with the blends, we construct blends, or you construct a blend really from coffees that complement each other. A nice analogy would be if we go to a restaurant and we sit down with the chef and he'll talk to us about his menu and how he's chosen certain ingredients to go with another dish and set out courses of a set menu that all complement each other. And that's essentially what we're trying to do when we create a blend of coffee. So we may choose some Colombian and then also some Nicaraguan coffee. And then what we often do with the signature blends is we put a small amount of Robusta into those, because in the UK you'll find that a lot of people have a real broad, the customer base has a broad spectrum of coffees that they enjoy. So you'll often see people come in and having black coffees, Americanos, espressos, and then you'll also find it's very common for the same outlet using the same machine and the same grinder to offer cappuccinos, lattes from the same bean. So you need something with a little bit of intensity in that crema that we've just shown you on the espresso to cut through the milk and give that taste of the coffee through the milk. Because you can sometimes find with the single origin coffees and the lightly roasted coffees that they're a little softer and more delicate. So once you start to mix these single origin coffees with milk, you can then wash away the taste. And then essentially a single origin coffee is more specialist and more delicate. So then you're kind of spoiling the
Mm-hmm.
the reason that you would select a single origin coffee. So for me, a nice single origin coffee would be perhaps an African coffee, such as an Ethiopian coffee, because whereas the characteristics of a South American or Central American coffee are usually quite fruity, you get quite fruity, like berries, quite like red berries. You also get hints of nuts in there as well, and some chocolatey tones coming through. Whereas you come across to an African coffee, and the characteristics there is usually light acidity, and you'll find quite a lot of citrus flavors coming through that. So lemons, oranges, which sounds quite strange when you're discussing the taste you can get from a coffee. However, once you kind of fall down that rabbit hole of trying different coffees and different preparation methods, you start to see the distinct taste differences across the regions. And this is something we found with the domestic market as we've entered into it, is people are much more adventurous when it comes to drinking a coffee at home, whereas the commercial guys, consistency in supply, consistency in taste and preparation. Domestic customers are quite happy to try Rwandan coffee, Ethiopian coffee, Tanzanian coffee, Indonesian coffee. We could have a coffee for every single day of the way. Yeah.
Out there. Excellent. So Ian, Dancing Goat Coffee, great name and a great logo. So what's the story behind the name?
Okay, so we chose a name that everybody would remember, and I think we succeeded there, because now I've told this story so many times. It's the story of coffee, or the old wives' tale about the story of coffee, is that it does originate from Ethiopia. And then the legend has it that it was discovered by the goat herder Kaldi. And one day he's laid in the shade, keeping out of the midday heat. Some of his goats are laid with him in the shade. And he noticed that some goats are always out, always dancing around, full of energy. And he noticed these goats always took the cherry from the coffee plant. So it contains 2 seeds, 2 beans, and it naturally contains caffeine. So it's a stimulant. So he noticed that the dancing goats that discovered coffee. So I don't know how if we could trace this back to be true, but certainly it's a good story, and everybody remembers that there's a dancing goat coffee.
It's a good story. Ian, finally, I know you're a Leeds supporter. So any predictions on Leeds in the Premier League?
Well, I think we're going to stay in the Premier League, definitely. Maybe just, but I think as well we'll probably see some youngsters coming through as well this season. I know there's a young man called Niall Huggins that's doing great at the moment, and I think there's a name to look out for the future. Okay,
excellent. Well, thank you very much, Ian Noble, for your time today. Now, I might be able to handle all the barrage of questions I get from a barista going forward. So good luck with the launch of the product into the retail market, and I'm sure it will be a success with your drive and determination. So thank you very much, Ian.
Thank you, Duncan.